Gagik II was the last Armenian king of Bagratuni dynasty, known as Gagik II king of Armenia, a juvenile at the time. He was enthroned as Gagik II and ruled for a brief period from 1042 to 1045 before the Bagratid dynasty rule collapsed in Armenia. Historical background: during the reign of Hovhannes, a feudal lord, David, who owned Tig during his battles against the Muslims, gained a large area which stretched all the way to Manzikert. David was a subject of Byzantium, and when he died his entire territory was occupied by Basil II, who had resumed the policy of bit by bit annexing Armenia to his empire. This policy of occupation and expansion was also pursued by the successors of Basil II. By the death of Hovhannes around 1040 and that of Ashot IV shortly after, Michael V, one of the successors of Basil II, was the emperor cornering Armenia. Michael claimed that the kingdom of Armenia, by virtue of the will of Hovhannes, was bequeathed to the Byzantine Empire upon his death. When the Armenian parapet Bahram Pahlavi prepared the coronation of the successor to Hovhannes, the king's nephew, Gagik II, who at the time was only 14 years old, the Byzantine emperor began supporting Veshisargus Hakazan, a pro-Byzantine Armenian prince and minister of the former king, who had initially been appointed regent. After this, the kingdom of Armenia resisted 3 assaults of the Byzantine Empire, forcing them to retreat. Byzantium exerted its forces to the utmost in order to conquer Armenia and once and for all annexing it to the empire. To this end, they sent a great army to the southern part of Armenia and at the same time convinced the king of Tashir Dazoraj to attack Armenia from the east. At the fierce battle that was fought by the walls of Armenia, General Bahram Pahlavi heavily defeated the Byzantine army, forcing them to leave 20,000 dead behind, according to contemporary Armenian chroniclers. This victory allowed Bahram Pahlavi, along with Catholicos Petros I Getadards, to crown Gagik II king of Armenia and subsequently take the fortress of Armenia, which was in the hands of Veshisargus. Sargus fled to the fortress of St. Mary and was eventually captured. After this victory, the new Armenian king, together with Bahram, turned toward the second enemy, the Seljuk Turks, who were still intent on conquering the kingdom. In the following 2 years, Gagik reinforced the army and fought against Seljuk hordes. Gregory Pahlavi, nephew of Bahram, defended the fortress of Bjni. The Armenian army hurried to confront the enemy at the location of the present-day Lake Sevan, where the king and his commander split the Armenian army into 2 units. The first division engaged in a battle with the Seljuk Turks and then pretended to retreat, drawing the Turks in pursuit toward the second army that was lying in ambush. The battle ended with a catastrophic defeat for the Seljuk Turks. In the kingdom of Vaspurakan, formerly under the protection of the Byzantine Empire, where the population had been deserted by the imperial army, the people eagerly anticipated the Armenian king would be driving the Seljuk Turks out of the homeland. Under leadership of Gagik II, known for his courage as the Lion, the Armenians revolted and the Turks were forced to retreat to Khoi and Salmus. Betrayal and exile. Bahram began negotiations with the new Byzantine Emperor Constantine IX Monomachus. Gagik II offered to be a vassal of the emperor, but the Byzantines did not accept it and prepared a new expedition entrusted to the Duke of Iberia, Michael Iosides, but he failed in the face of Armenian resistance. Emperor Constantine wished to continue the policy of his predecessors and therefore sent an army to conquer conquer Armenia. Whilst inciting the Arab emir of Divin, Abu al-Aswad, to attack Armenia from the east, King Gagik II, however, managed to placate Abu al-Aswad by sending him gifts. This allowed Gagik to concentrate his forces against the Byzantines, eventually forcing them to flee. Gagik II proved his worth for the throne and the reputation of a fighting king, which had passed on to him from the very first kings in the Bagratuni dynasty. The Byzantines soon realized that if Armenia could not be conquered by force, it could be taken by treachery. Gagik pardoned Vessagis, whose loyalties, however, remained with Byzantium, fostering the hope of being appointed as king of Armenia if Byzantium was to conquer Armenia. With the assistance of Vessagis, the Byzantine emperor invited Gagik II to Constantinople to sign an allegedly permanent peace treaty. Gagik II was invited to visit Constantinople. There the emperor demanded that the Armenian king abdicate and hand over the throne to him, and as he refused to do so, was thrown into jail. The Byzantines promptly sent an army to Armenia, which was now leaderless. In lieu of its rightful king, Armenians considered offering the throne of Arni to David I and Hohen of Laureate to the emir of Divin, Abu al-Aswad, married to the sister of David and Hohen. Even Bagratid of Georgia was considered, but surprisingly not the Bagratuni king Gagik Abbas of Kars. The Patriarch Petros did not approve of any of the three candidates and finally conceded the delivery to the Byzantines of the city of Arni and other fortresses. With his connivance, the Byzantines were finally able to occupy Arni in 1045. The country was incorporated into the empire. Exile years. Gagik received as compensation for his kingdom the district of Lycandris in Asia Minor and the town of Pizu in the vicinity of Caesarea. He was also granted the use of a palace on the Bosphorus in Constantinople and a pension from the imperial treasury. Several seals testify Kakikios Aniodes as Duke of the Tamar of Charchanan. During his time in exile, according to Matthew of Edessa, Gagik also took part in a theological debate between him and the Byzantine emperor in Constantinople, defending the Armenian church and its tradition and rites. The metropolitan of Caesarea, named Marcos, lost no occasion to express his scorn toward Gagik, whom he considered a heretic. After several insults by Marcos directed against him, Gagik eventually murdered the bishop, an act that made Gagik even more unpopular among the locals. As the story goes, it is said the bishop had a dog named Armen, so as to scorn the Armenians. One day, Gagik visited the bishop, had the dog put in a canvas bag and beat with sticks. He then had the bishop seized and placed in the same bag with the dog, now maddened by pain. The bishop died in pain from the wounds inflicted by his own dog. Gagik was captured and later killed on May 5, November 24, 1079 by the Byzantine governors of Kysostra, who had his body mutilated and hanged from the fort for others to see. His body was later buried outside the fort but was later said to have been secretly conveyed by an Armenian from Arni named Banik to a convent he had built in a city called Pizu. Shortly after Gagik was killed, his youngest son David was poisoned by his father-in-law for suspected treachery. Gagik's eldest son Hovhan had married the daughter of the governor of Arni and still lived there, but was in Georgia when it was captured. Hovhan had a son Ashot who was poisoned and his body brought to Pizu. Hovhan did not survive his son by long, at which time the posterity of the senior male Bagration line of kings of Armenia was extinct. During the reign of Thorasir, the Armenian kingdom of Cilicia, the death of King Gagik II was avenged by the Armenian forces who took the fortress of Kysostra and executed the three Byzantines who had killed the last Armenian king of Arni. In fiction, Gagik appears as a character in Arni Bagratid, Bagratid novel which chronicles the fall of Arni and the Bagratid line.